Hello,
Cool.
hello, and welcome back. Today we have a very dear friend of mine who I've worked with for a number of years, who is going to talk to us about her experiences and also her experiences as a woman, as a manager, and as a mother. And I'm very, very excited to welcome Kimberly Porsche, who is a senior project manager in the energy industry, and my friend. Welcome.
Hello.
So let's kick it off. So we've had some conversations, many conversations on, stress and burnout and corporate trauma,
Hmm.
the experiences that we've had as women in the workplace.
Yep.
But maybe just to open it up, when I say the phrase corporate trauma, what does that bring up for you?
Well, for me, it actually brings up the reason why I left a corporation that I had been working with and building a career with for 13 years in an organization that I really had defined myself with. Um, I left that because of the trauma that I experienced there, specifically around my motherhood and my family life, and sort of the impacts that it had on that I ultimately, had to choose my family and my own mental health over, what I had thought was the career path that I had desired. Um, and, specifically in my experience, so I'm a mother of two children. They are 5 and 6, and they're amazing little people. And I also, interestingly enough, I had worked with my husband as well. We both joined this organization coming out of grad school. And we're both on an upwardly mobile track, both very kind of ambitious, driven people. And we had been both working towards our, family goals and career goals, really as a team. And I felt, as we approached the part of our journey where we wanted to start a family, we both felt that there was a lot of pressure from the organization to kind of like dictate how and when and where we could do that. And so that was kind of like the first bit of trauma, where it was sort of like, well, if I want to be upwardly mobile and successful, well, I have to have kids on like the corporation's timeline, or I need to put that into consideration because it could negatively impact my career. And also there were conversations from others being like, oh, well, now your husband is going to become like the leading spouse. And it's kind of like, why do we have to compete with one another? So that added some other like trauma into our own marriage, as well as like, we couldn't be considered as like individuals in the organizations for who we were. Now we were like a unit, and one was lesser or greater than the other, which I think is like highly inappropriate in a corporate setting anyway.
I've heard the phrase before, you've probably heard it as well. Women are expected to work like they don't have kids and raise kids like they don't work.
Yeah. And I also too is like the men. So my husband, he is a fantastic just person in general. I wouldn't have married him otherwise, but he is a highly involved father. And he also felt the impact of like, one, he was seeing kind of the stress that it was putting on me, which impacted him, but also he wasn't able to like do fatherhood in the way that he wanted because he was being constrained by the organization. And all around us, when you are trying to craft like your career and your life, you're always looking for, touch points in your organization of like people who you want to either mentor you or like provide aspiration. And we looked around the landscape, and what we saw was, a lot of men who either had wives that just followed them around the world, you know, recultivating their whole family situation everywhere that they moved. Or we had seen, you know, men who have a string of families in every place that they've lived. And, you know, there really wasn't great examples of people who had really good, strong family dynamics with both spouses working and like equally successful, looking ahead of us. So like that also, you know, was something that I found to be kind of scarring, because it put limitations on like how I viewed myself and like viewed our family situation. Instead of like letting our, you know, us define for ourselves what we wanted our success as a family, a success as individuals to look like, we were kind of being dictated by like the molds of what's around us.
And to me, you know, you don't then have a role model in the company, and you know, whether you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, or maybe in a minority, or maybe, you know, someone who's hoping to start a family or live a particular life, and you're looking up and you don't see anything that you want or who you are mirrored back, I'm sure that can be really disheartening.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like, you know, I would look around too, just kind of in my own peer group. And I could see on my colleagues, because at the point in time that we are at in our lives, we are at the age that, you know, people are getting married, people are starting families, and you know, in our particular situation, you know, I was like a corporate husband in the working force, but I was also the wife of a corporate husband, and I could see both sides. So, you know, in our sort of corporate experience, we were moving places and you know, living in these remote places for periods of time. And a lot of the typical scenario is the husband moves and the family comes along, and the wife, you know, either doesn't work, like her job is to take care of the family, or she has kind of some sort of like smaller thing that's like really kind of, you know, not the income winner of the family. And I could see the, you know, with the husbands, I could get where they're coming from, and like they're feeling like, I need to do this, I need to go and do what I'm told by the corporation and climb up this ladder because I have to provide and I have to do this and that. And I could sympathize with that, and I could sympathize with like how they felt the pressures to perform at work. But then I also was very close with the wives, and I was living their experience, and I could sympathize with all the things that they were going through, that like moving all the time has such a big impact on them. They're constantly having to make new friends. They're constantly having to like reassociate their kids. Their husbands aren't home, you know, and they bear the burden of managing the kids on their own. And in my view, like I had a little bit different experience where I felt the guilt of, I was not there with my kids. A nanny was there, or daycare was there. And I felt like the guilt of like, well, I'm not being the best mother that I feel like I can be. And I have to choose. I have to choose between being a mom or being like a corporate badass. And I couldn't be both in that experience. So ultimately, you know, when I was pushed really hard to work some exorbitant amount of hours greater than the normal work week, or have a demotion, I ultimately just chose myself and left that corporate experience and set my sights on a new one.
Okay, so you're still in the corporate world.
Yes.
So maybe talk about what some of the positive experiences you've had that made you want to stay in that environment, and maybe we'll finish with sort of what you did after you chose to leave one organization and join another, because I think that would be a really good insight for our listeners as well.
Yeah.
So what were some of the positive experiences?
So along my journey, like there were definitely people whose mentorship, and though they weren't necessarily like the mentors that I felt emulated in me, they were people that I admired because they had values that were similar to mine. And one in particular was a boss that I had while I was having my second child. And this person was actually, had gone through their own corporate trauma and had a family who, he was no longer married to his wife. His kids were living in a completely different country. And he really prioritized his family experience as best he could, like given the situation. And so when it came time for my maternity leave, well, one, I felt at that time, it was my second child, and I sort of felt emboldened because this person had such a good influence on me to, ask for what I wanted. So when it was time for my maternity leave, it also helped that this individual was British, because British and American maternity laws are a bit different. So I think he was sympathetic to that the American protections are just not as good as the European ones are.
Yeah.
But I felt empowered by him to go in and have that conversation, say, I'm having a child and this is what I want. I'd like to have this long leave. And I said, I understand by law, you can't hold my position or offer me benefits or whatnot, but, I want a longer leave than, what my basic entitlements are. Are we able to work something out? And this individual said, of course. He's like, you are a valued employee. I want to keep you. So like, I will work with HR to make something happen, within the legislature to be able to do that. And I also said to this individual, I said, listen, don't count me out. I am ambitious and I want a particular role that I knew was coming up. Like a position was becoming available in something that I wanted to grow in, which was like an upward step for me. And I said, when that position becomes available, if it's in this time frame that I'm on leave, call me. Don't forget me because I'm out, like call me. And so that did happen. It was earlier than when my leave was supposed to be done. And I said, okay, listen, this is like a little bit earlier, like let's compromise. And so I did not end up taking the full amount of leave, but I did still take more than what a traditional American one was. And also like, given that circumstance too, I was able to have a situation where instead of pumping, which is kind of the normal, like the daycare was actually right next to the office, and I went over and fed my child every day rather than pumping. So like that was a really good experience. But it was also because I said this is what I'm doing. When I came back to work, I said these are the things that I'm doing. How can we make this work? And I think because I went in kind of with that approach of here's what I want to do, what can we do to make it work, that I was a benefactor of a positive experience there. Again, kind of along the way, learning to kind of advocate for myself. And that was one of the things that when I had gone through my experience, and I'm always looking to help the people coming up behind me. When I met other women in the workforce who were coming up to kind of where I had been in a previous part of my life, I tried to share with them, like, here's what I did. Here's what I asked for. Here's how I went about it. You don't have to do what I did, but like, this is what my experience was. And so, don't be afraid to ask for what you want and work on negotiating because you are worthy. And so when I left the corporate experience that I was in and was looking for my new job opportunity, I did a lot of really self-reflection. I was like, you know, this company didn't make me feel my best self-worth. I'm worth a lot, in my opinion. Like I was like, I'm worth a lot. You know, I have all these years of experience. Like I am capable. I'm motivated, whatnot. So when I went looking for a job, it wasn't like tail between my legs. It was like, here I am. Here's what I can offer. And here are my expectations of you as an organization. And here's what you can expect of me in return. And when I came in and interviewed, you know, it wasn't just like a one-way interview. It was a two-way interview because I was, you know, selecting companies to go to. Like for me, it wasn't just like, oh, the company's trying to hire me. I was like, no, you know, I'm looking to work, you know, are you a good enough organization for me to be part of? You know, I think that kind of turning it on its head, it was like, is this organization worthy of my time? Because my time is precious. If I'm not with my family, like that time that I'm not with my family is precious, right? Because I can't get that back. So are you a worthy organization to have me? And, you know, here are the rules of engagement. And it's, if you don't find that acceptable, then it's not the right fit. And so going into my new organization, like those boundaries and expectations were clearly set. And I've had such a better experience, a more balanced experience. And, you know, I continue to kind of speak that mantra to the colleagues and the people that I interact with, you know, to say, you know, this employment, you know, it's a two-way street.
Yeah. I love that, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I took a whole lot away around, you know, advocating for yourself. And I think knowing your worth, knowing your values, and knowing, you know, what your priorities are and where, and then you can build boundaries around them and ask for what you need. I think that's so important. And I think, you know, one of the biggest takeaways for me, and it's important to remember in this corporate trauma work, is, you know, it's not about one person or one company who are creating these negative experiences. Like this is a big machine that has been going and growing for a number of years. But what it is about is, you know, those one champions, those trailblazers who stand apart from everyone and say, I'm going to give you what you need. You know, I recognize that this is hard. I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to meet you halfway. I think all of us can take that on and we can be champions and we can be allies in this, you know, while we're slowly steering the ship in this, you know, in this otherwise big machine.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is like corporate trauma is scarring. Right. And I feel there's kind of two ways you can take your trauma. You can, with any scar, you know, physical, I'm to speak about physical scar here. You can see that scar on your body. And this is not for, you know, this is a metaphor, but you can see the scar on your body and you can let it make you feel less about yourself. You know, and you can see it as like an imperfection, and you can let it weigh you down, or you can see that scar and wear it with pride and be like, I had this experience, it left this scar on me, but like I grew and I learned. And you can use that scar to motivate you to remember like what you don't want to do in the past, you know, like what you want to take away from that experience and how you want to do it better next time. And I really feel like there's kind of like two ways you can, you know, I like to say I earned every single one of my scars. And, you know, I take away the good from that and leave behind the hurt and the pain, because, you know, that scar is there and it reminds me of something, but it no longer can hurt me. It doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy that you got the support and you were empowered to make choices for you and for your family. And yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Kimberly.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.